So let's pick it back up on 1 John chapter 2 in verse 21. I do not write to you because you do not know the truth, but because you do know it, and because no lie comes from the truth. Bing, 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 bing. See, the nature of truth is it is true. Are there any truths, real truths that also contain an element of a lie? No. And here's why. Because if a truth holds an element of a lie, it's not truth anymore. It's kind of like, oh gosh, in the old days, this is one of the oldest sermon illustrations I've ever heard. The old days, Ivory soap used to claim on its wrapper, and I don't know, it may still, but it says 99.99% pure. Well, okay, that's pretty good, but it's not pure. It's 0.01 impure. And it depends on what that particular 0.01 percentage is as to whether that impurity is going to make a big difference or not. See, my view is that with truth, it'd make all the difference in the world. If it's mostly true, then it's not true. If it's mostly true, then it's basically untrue. John writes, you know the truth. And oh, by the way, this truth is so true that there's no lie that is in it. And then he goes on in verse 22, who is the liar? It is whoever denies that Jesus is the Christ. Now, he, I think, is making a claim here, and he's pointing the flashlight of truth onto people who in his day were saying, these were the Gnostics, who were saying that, well, Jesus may have been God's son, but he was spiritually so. Gnosticism is a gnarly, I think it was made into a complex idea by these first century Gnostics because they desired, what they wanted was to have a mystery religion that was so cloaked and needed, you had to be initiated into it with a new truth. Wow. I don't think that idea ever has gone away. Now, it's taken different forms, but I know that there are, and I'm going to throw a rock here. I'll just give you, fair warning on it. I know there are people in academia who look down on the rest of us and say, well, of course, they're uneducated and uncultured, and they lack the background to be able to understand. Yeah, and I just want to say, yeah, because really, if it's true, it's true. Well, anyway, these people deny that Jesus is the Christ. Such a person is the Antichrist. There are two ways to take this, and we talked about it before, so I'm trying to get through it quickly here. There is the Antichrist, and then he goes on. Previously, he went on, once he had used the idea of the Antichrist as the Antichrist, then he said there are many Antichrists. I don't know where the distinction is. I feel that if one has a desire to honor Christ, and in their heart they are doing what they can to reverence him, as Peter said, set apart Christ as Lord, I don't think we're going to be taken in by the Antichrist. But there are a lot of antichrists, people who stand in opposition to all that Jesus stands for. And those John just says they're liars. And not only do they deny that Jesus is the Christ, he goes on in at the end of that verse, denying the Father and the Son. It's if you deny the Father, you deny the Son. If you deny the Son, you deny the Father. There's no. I guess you'd have to be at least somewhat Trinitarian in your theological bent, believing that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are the Godhead, that they are three different, unique personalities in one being, or however to me, it's the most inscrutable theological point. How is it that the Father can be separate, the Son can be separate, and the Holy Spirit can be separate, and yet they are one? No, I believe they are. And then he goes on and says in verse 23, no one who denies the Son has the Father. In other words, don't claim God as your Father if you deny the Son. Whoever acknowledges the Son has the Father also. There is this idea that Jesus, the Son, and God the Father are one. You can't deny one without denying the other. You can't embrace one without embracing the other. I don't know that carries as much emotional weight for us as it probably would have in the first century. But the truth of this has to be, somehow we got to do something with the truth of it. I think the idea of denying the Son or the Father deserves just a poke. When I was a kid, this idea was it was a big old club that was used as a threat. And here's how it felt like it to me. And as I look back on it, I'm not sure that I think I was right. See, Jesus said, if you acknowledge me before men, I'll acknowledge you before my Father in heaven. But if you deny me before men, I will deny you before the Father. This is not just a quid pro quo. I keep coming back to that. But it's not just you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. That's not what this is about. This is about our standing, our acknowledged standing with God because of Jesus. The point is, acknowledge Jesus. How do you do that? See, to acknowledge is at least one of the opposites of denial. Okay? How do we acknowledge Jesus? Well, I think one of the ways, an obvious way, is to speak up on his behalf. And by the way, listen, Jesus doesn't need you to defend him, right? We got to remind ourselves, this is the same guy who rose from the dead. If you come back to life and burst out of the tomb, you don't need a bunch of defenders, right? It's kind of like I've been rereading the Chronicles of Narnia during this. My wife and I were exposed to COVID, and so we're kind of locked down, and I'm bored out of my gourd. But I do have a lot of books, and so I've been rereading the Chronicles of Narnia, and I love them. I'm still a kid in so many ways, and anyway, if you find yourself locked down and bored, download or get a hold of the Chronicles of Narnia and just read them. Aslan, the great lion in Lewis's books. Wow. See, the lion needs no defenders. The lion, he defends himself plenty well. I think it was Spurgeon that said The truth is like a lion. You don't need to defend the truth. You just turn it loose and it defends itself. So acknowledging Jesus as Lord of my life is not so much about me defending Jesus. It's about me demonstrating that I have that submission to and relationship with him. Now on the other side, we have denial. What does it look like to deny the Father and to deny the Son? Because if we deny one, we deny them both. Well, there are lots of different ways. And one is to just blatantly say, I don't believe. I don't. And oh, by the way, if you believe, you're an idiot. There is a lot of the world we live in, and I'm not talking about the globe, I'm talking about the system that we live in and under that basically are saying that much. There are other less blatant ways, and one of the ways I see showing up in myself and all around, I to be careful because I can't judge others, but my observation is that others, and at times I myself, live as though I didn't have anybody that I had to submit to, but I was the arbiter of right and wrong, good and bad. I make my own decisions and I do what I want. I have to be careful here. I'm going to dance on the edge for a minute and just say, I am so tired of a system of government that seems to be run by a majority of men and women who are self-interested politicians and not servants of the people. It just irritates the thunder out of me. And I know there are those who truly are public servants who they really want to call the whole system back to its roots and origins and intentions. They're not getting much of a voice, and they're sure not behind the steering wheel, and that bothers me. Well, I look at my own life and realize that there are too many times where I am doing essentially with the government of my own life what I accuse those men and women of doing. When we live as though we were our own owners, we're never more than a hair's breadth away from denying the Father and the Son. When I act as though I don't have to check in with anybody, when I act as though if I want it, then it's fine, when I justify my sin, when I justify my out and out selfishness, I'm so very close to that point of denial. Now, this is essential. I only have as much permission as you give me to point out my observations about this in your life, right? If you haven't given me permission, then I don't know that. I mean, I would need a real clear indicator that God was saying, you go tell him. I don't really have the temperament of a prophet. I can be easily offended, but I don't have this fiery, Here's what I think is of first importance beyond that is I have the obligation to make those observations about myself. That was the brickbat. That was the club. Are you denying Jesus? And that's a legitimate question, but the point of it is not to plant seeds of doubt and guilt, but just to hold a mirror that reflects my character that I have to look into. And the question is, am I reflecting that God is my Father and Jesus is my Lord? And if I am, how do I keep that up? And if there are places in my life where that is not happening, then in partnership with the grace of God, I have a challenge of turning that over to and walking in partnership to demonstrate, to reflect God's nature, his governance, his rule in my life. At the beginning of the year, could there ever be anything more valid than asking and answering those questions? Well, it's up to you. I'll be back next time, God willing, with another installment of Soul Care with Stevie Boy.